I'm proud to introduce to you guys Larry Higgins. He is the founder of Skip Genie, and Skip Genie is like a premier skip tracing service. I know a ton of people that use it. I use it myself quite a bit. And Larry, can you just tell us a little bit about the service, kind of how you differentiate yourself, and then just a little bit about you?
So the two, I would say there's two main things that differentiate us. So that most of your skip trace providers, there's I used to make this argument years ago when we started about what's really data appending versus skip tracing. And a lot of what's out there is data appending, where it's bulk, it's cheap, there's a place for that. I'm not bashing it or anything like that. I'm just saying it's different. And what we do, we try and collect and provide the highest quality data that we can get for true, just for better contact rates. You're going to pay a little bit more for it. Over time, we've gotten that as we've grown and our volume has steadily risen over the last 4 years. If you've been paying attention, our search cost used to be over $1 a search, like flat out. And I knew it was a tough sell, but people wanted the better data. And over time, now we've got it down, well below 20 cents a search. So the quality of data is one thing, a more complete data set. So now a lot of people are adding more than just phone numbers. That's a little bit more common. But we provide a complete data set of address history, names of relatives, all the phone numbers, possible email addresses, a death indicator, age, which age can be very important. We can touch on that later. Basically the full array of things. And the other thing is we have a dashboard where you can do individual searches. So there's a lot of people, myself included, for longest time, bulk searches did nothing for me. All I wanted was a dashboard where I could individually truly skip trace people. Bulk searching would have been a nightmare if that was all I had. And besides that, I do a weekly phone call every Wednesday night, or generally it's on Wednesdays. Here lately, we've had to shuffle it one day to the left or right. But I'm just there to support people, whatever it is. Obviously a lot of it tends to be skip tracing, contacting people. But it could be how to find a buyer for an oddball property, or basic marketing stuff, or what's a good auto dialer. You name it. Especially for the newer investors, it can be some of the more basic stuff that we take for granted. Just walk them through that.
Sure, absolutely. And so skip tracing, like you just said, data appending. There's data appending and there's skip tracing. And I'm not personally aware of the differences when it comes to the technicalities of it. But I know skip tracing has just really gone boom in the last 2 or 3 years. And obviously, you guys have been on the forefront of that. And now there's a ton of other companies that have really stepped into that to provide that service. What do you think is something that perhaps a new investor needs to look out for, or a new investor is maybe getting wrong when they're choosing their skip tracing service?
So I said I'm not bashing other forms of data providers, stuff like that. There is one form of it. I'm not going to name any names or anything like that. And it's really not as common as it used to be. But if you're only getting 1 or 2 phone numbers per hit, just don't run away from that. If you're maxed out, it only give you 1 phone number, 2 phone numbers. Yes, you can get it for 2 or 3 cents maybe, but you're running in circles. The data is so poor. You will connect with some people, but the data quality is so poor, you're just missing out on so much. So that's the first thing. Secondly, I would say, who are you marketing to? So if I'm dealing with deceased owners, vacant properties, highly distressed properties, I absolutely want the best data I can get my hands on, period. I'll pay whatever I need to pay to get that, because otherwise I risk losing a deal by not being able to identify people or reach those people. That, and then the third thing would be execution. So, Greg, you've talked to Greg. So I've always specialized in the highly targeted stuff, the most distressed properties out there. If all you're doing is hey, I'm going to send out a couple rounds of ringless voicemails, that's not going to get it done. You will get some deals, you'll get the lay down stuff that way, but sometimes you need to call, you need to text, and maybe do RVM too. When people say what's the best one, I say it's all the above. I'm always going to call. If I'm pursuing a house, I'm going to call, I'm going to text, and then I might escalate it. If I suspect I have a good number, or I know I do, and that person just isn't responding, maybe at that point I'll drop a letter or go knock on a door. I think door knocking is very effective, but I'm in the greater Houston area. Depending on where those houses are, I could drive around and hit 6 houses. It'd take me most of the day.
Yeah.
And then people work, so there's a good chance they're not home. Are you going to drive around? So it's just, like I said, it's just part of that process. Be thorough, be persistent, and sometimes you hit dead ends. That's the other thing I talk about. I like to lead even more if it's a highly distressed property and the owner is just a ghost or has died, and I'm trying to find the relatives. I'll bring in a genealogist if I need to. I will get outside of Skip Trace databases, go into all kinds of different online county records and things like that, because you never know what you'll find. Sometimes there's very key information in there. Just things like that, just really dialing down. But for your typical run of the mill stuff, like if you're just marketing to, let's say, high equity absentee owners, that's your list. There's 30,000 of them in your area. Yeah, you probably don't need the best data ever. I'm just saying that's where, if I were that guy, I might, the lower cost data might be a little bit more appealing. Not just because I have Skip Genie. When I started going down this route of cold calling people, 6 years ago, I learned real fast. I just want to cut to the chase and get the best data possible to get the highest contact ratio possible, period. And that's just my personal bias for that. And ultimately that's kind of what led to Skip Genie.
Sure, absolutely. And so before Skip Genie, what kind of resources were there available? Like, what was missing? What brought you to bring Skip Genie to basically found Skip Genie? Because I know you guys are bringing relatives into it when you're doing that Skip Trace, and you're bringing a lot of different information that other people aren't. So is it just something that was missing before, and that's why you founded Skip Genie?
Well, it was hard to get before. So I saw the value in the data because I started off using been verified and white pages, trying all of that real cheap stuff. And I hated it. So I'd always heard about TLO, and back then you could get approved for TLO with a home office, and you had a credentialing process, but it wasn't too cumbersome. And they came out and did the inspection. When I got into TLO data, that's where everything started to click for me. I was getting in contact with people. I was getting more information, more data. It was better data. And I saw how functional that dashboard was inside, and that they provide for their users. And I realized, hey, I know it works for me. There wasn't a lot of people doing what we do now. Cold calling wasn't, people laugh when you talk about cold calling then. They're like, oh, that's a way, drop some mail, blah, blah. I'm like, no, you don't get it. There's nobody cold call. It was wide open. It's just, if you call now, it's like, hey, you're the fifth person to call me on a typical broadly marketed to list, and they're getting texts and all that. So it was wide open back then, but I knew everything else was saturated. Google pay-per-click, mail, all this other stuff, it worked, but it's saturated for the newer investors. That was it was a very expensive prospect to try and learn it. First of all, you could spend $10,000 and not get a deal on mail in a major market. It was just expensive. And I knew I could, through the data that we could provide, once we figured out how we could source it for ourselves, I knew I could kind of teach people this. And at some point I knew there was going to be more and more people cold calling. I said, let's be on the front end of that. It was a no-brainer to me. So that's what kind of led to it. I knew the demand wasn't necessarily there at the beginning, but I knew it was going to come. And we kind of we did what we could to help people see they needed to add this into their marketing mix.
Sure, absolutely. That's great. So now one of the questions that I get personally from a lot of newer investors is, what's the best list? And I kind of chuckle now because skip tracing is so widely available, and now texting is so widely available that it's my belief that most everybody, if you're on, one of the popular lists, vacant, absentee, high equity, foreclosure, probate, any of the major ones, if you're on one of those lists, you're probably getting called and texted by 5 different investors relatively quickly. And so I tell people there's really no major list. There's no secret list to pull. Maybe driving for dollars or your county list would be more unique, But most of the other ones, there's no like secret list. It's more in the sales process. Do you agree with me? And if not, like, what's your answer to that?
Yeah, there's only a couple that I would consider truly unique. Successor Data has some unique stuff there. And then a lot of cities you can go get like water shutoffs or water meter pools. There's no lead provider that provides that. You have to go to your city and request that. Everybody's got their own processing costs or fees that they charge for that. But even then, like I tell people, this comes up on our call sometimes. I'm like, yes, it's a good list. You'll get deals from it. But a lot of those houses are probably showing up on just a standard vacant house list anyway. That's just going to be a much tighter list of water meter pool, because a vacant house list has a lot of houses that really aren't vacant, or they're vacant for a reason, they're not distressed, that kind of deal. So if you get the water meter list, most likely, especially if it's a water meter pool, most likely 98-99% of the time it's truly vacant. There's probably some other stuff going on. So I'm kind of with you. There's really not a whole lot of unique lists out there. Those two kind of fall into the unique category. To me, it's more about understanding how to attack each list. Like I referenced a high equity absentee owner. That's a broad list. It's constantly getting hammered. They're getting all kinds of mail. They might be seeing stuff on Facebook, whatever. I'm going to do a much lesser intense effort with those people. Maybe it's mail, maybe it's RVMs, whatever, versus your stacked higher distress list. The higher distress stuff, I'm putting in a much concentrated effort on that. Calling, texting. I'm really paying a lot more attention to where I am on pretty much every lead. You probably heard Greg reference what I call the trifecta: death, vacancy, and taxes, or a loan in default of some sort, financial distress. So taxes or loan in default. If you can find 20 of those properties that have that going on, it's just a no-brainer to me. You're at least going to have a couple of good leads out of it, if not a deal. And especially for the newer investors, I know there's probably not a lot of new investors on here, but it's just why I think one of the reasons I gravitate towards those, because I'm not a sales guy. I suck at sales, don't like it, get no satisfaction out of it. But those are such laydowns. I could go in there and comfortably make a very low ball offer. So I'm like, what? You didn't even realize you owned it, or you thought it was already gone, whatever. Or I'm the savior that's going to clean this mess up so that you can sell it, and it just much easier to move. So that's the biggest thing with me is understand your list. Like you said, I don't know if you know Stinson Bland.
Oh yeah, Stinson's a good friend of mine.
Yeah, so one of the Flip Nerd events, he was talking about the probate list. I've always said that one's getting hammered. Realtors, investors, everything. And a couple of years ago, his dad died a year or two ago. And once they started the probate process, I think he said within 3 weeks or 2 weeks, it was 2 or 3 weeks, he had received like 70, 72 pieces of mail and 2 phone calls.
Sure.
And that helped quantify what I already knew, but I'd never heard numbers like that. I was like, that's kind of cool when we're investors and we come like, if you have a rental property, you're probably getting people's mailers, that kind of stuff. I just like getting that feedback. So.
Sure, absolutely. That's great. I think I heard you talk about that trifecta. I've tried to dig up the post or the podcast that it was on. I even had one of my virtual assistants go back and listen to a lot of your podcast appearances this morning to try to dig it up, but I couldn't find it, truthfully. So I think it was 2 or 3 years ago. It was like very early on. I heard you talk about that trifecta, and that was before like list stacking. So you were like one of the first ones that I heard talk about, like find ones that are on like 2 or 3 different lists, just to give you credit there. But I also heard you talk about finding some of the biggest deals like from that list. I think you said you found one and it was worth like 95 grand, like a $95,000 wholesale fee or something like that, if I'm not mistaken, that were on those 3 lists.
Yeah, our biggest deal was 150,000 off of that. Yeah. But we've done 75, we've done 80, 50, 40. I mean, solid deal. And there, and then you had your others that we just barely missed out on. They were there. We thought we were going to have them, and they were in that range. So that's what I loved about it. It doesn't take a ton of money. It just doesn't take a ton. Greg's marketing budget. Yeah, he's spending a little bit more, testing and doing a little bit more. But Greg can consistently do deals and live comfortably off a few $100 a month. You know, if he gets crazy, maybe he spends $1,000 a month in marketing.
Yeah, that's
It's,
awesome. So death, vacancy, and taxes. That's the trifecta that you recommend the most, that you think is a really good combination, right?
yeah. And you'll see there's other, you know, because generally or 2 out of 3, because honestly, even a big market, there's only so many of those. But 2 out of 3 is pretty good. And you'll see a lot of times there'll be even other indicators on top of that. It's, you know, maybe it's code violations. I like code violation lists. That's a good roundabout way to find vacant houses or distressed houses. So code violations or divorce or previous listings, expired listings. If you dig in on each of those properties, if they have 2 or 3 of those indicators, you're typically going to see some other stuff on a lot of them too.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you talk about death, is that only probate?
No, as a matter of fact, I've never marketed a probate list. It's
Okay.
part of the complete data set. When I skip trace the list, let's say I have a list of all these houses are vacant with a tax delinquency or a loan that's 90, 120 days late. I skip trace that list and then I see all the people that come back as deceased. Now I've got death, vacancy, and the taxes. So that's one way to do it. Because a lot of people die, they don't have a will, so they're never going to show up in probate. Now, they can still be probated, but if the family doesn't have the means or for whatever reason, there's all kinds of reasons. It just nothing ever happens. So they will never show up on a probate list. The other thing is if it's vacant and has delinquent loans or taxes, if I skip trace that list and I pay attention to the ages, especially on bulk skip trace, you can this is simple filtering. It's all click, 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 you filtered it. Let's say it's vacant with 3 years of delinquent taxes for $10,000. And the person about showing is dead, but they're 95 years old. Something's going on there. There's a chance they've died. There's no record of it yet. That happens a lot. Or, you know, they're living with family, they're in a nursing home, something that's high distress. I've seen people one lady came back at like 121 years old as alive. I'm like, yeah, sorry. And I can't say, I don't know why, but all this stuff gets pulled from the Social Security Death Index. For whatever reason, some people's deaths don't get recorded. I even look at names. Like that house that was 150 grand, or yeah, we made 150 grand on it. And this is in Houston. We're not in California where we have these huge price points. Hell, we sold the house for 200K. So we picked it up for 50, sold it for 200, collected our 150. That just attests to the distress and everything that was going on, multiple errors. It was complicated. But on that one, the first thing, I'm not kidding you, the first thing that jumped out at me was her name. It was Mildred. But before I even saw her age or status or anything, I was like, nobody in 80 years been named Mildred. It turned out she was dead, but she was showing as alive at like 98 years old or something. And that was just, when I see old names, that gets my attention. It always does. So.
Sure, absolutely. You had said something about age before. Inside Skip Genie, there's a way to filter out age.
Yeah, so it comes back in the bulk results. So let's say you have a list. Here's a process. I don't know if you know Brandon Schwalm.
I do not.
So Brandon, he's out of Florida, younger guy. He's high volume. His average assignment, I think, was like 17 grand. Last couple of years, he's been wholesaling like 1.2, 1.4 million in assignment fees.
Wow.
High volume guy. He heard a little interview I did with Greg actually about finding these deals because he knew they were in the mix just through the sheer number of the volume of his marketing. So what he was doing, he was already skip tracing with us. He said, look, take that list in its own column. We have the death. Automatically take everybody that's deceased and blast all the relatives. We'll run a relative report for you. And, you know, you can call and text a dead person all day. They're not going to answer. Well, I'll say that. Sometimes their family phone numbers, a child or a spouse, their phone number will show up on that person's report. It happens fairly regularly. So I do tell people it doesn't hurt to try. But generally, if I see somebody's deceased on a list, if I ran a list of 1,000 people, let's say 40 of them came back dead, I'm going to take those 40 and run a relative report where it gives me the full data set on every single relative. and then plug that into my marketing machine, whether it's cold calling, texting, drop a mail, whatever. Simple step. You're already geared to do it. It's just taking that one little extra step. The other thing is on the age, pick a cutoff age. If it's a highly distressed list, maybe it's just vacant houses. Anybody that shows up over the age of, you pick the age, 75, 80, I'm gonna say anybody over this age, there could be something going on. They're not well, they're living with family, they relocated, they died, no record of it. I'm going to do the same thing I did with the deceased people. I'm going to assume maybe they've died or something's going on, run the full reports on the relatives and blast all the relatives, just step. He did that process, tweaked this process. And then when I talked with Brandon, like 2 or 3, 4 months later, I didn't even ask him. I knew he would implement. I didn't even ask him, but he said, look, I've already got like, it was 2 deals off of that process for like $80,000 in assignment fees.
Wow.
So his average assignment fee was 17 grand. And I'd already told him, I said, this step alone, because of your volume, easily in 1 year, I'm being very, very, very conservative. It will yield more than $100,000, period. Like I have no, because I knew he was going to do it. I was like, no problems. Like it will do it. And again, 2-3 months later, he's already 80 grand on his way to the 100. And I don't know how he finished the year. I haven't asked him, but that's a simple maximizing the use of that data. It's a simple filtering. All that can be done in minutes, and that's it. Versus the other people that are strictly they're not paying attention to the data, even if they have the deceased and the age, they're just taking those phone numbers or the addresses and just doing one step and done and hoping somebody calls back or answers.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's the way that it has been trending. I know for myself, as we start to grow in bulk, it's easy to get a little lazy and only blast out to the 1 number, maybe 2 numbers, and not go very deep. So I'm going to start searching a little bit deeper and going deeper with certain leads.
Yeah, and I say maybe some leads that's fine, but others like, hey, it's worth kind of just taking a look at your different list, gauging the distress level, and then how much effort and how to attack each one. I started doing a little bit more routine stuff finally last year. I held off on doing foreclosures, pre-foreclosures. I'm in Texas. We have a short consolidated time frame. Other states, it can take months or a year or longer to get the foreclosure. In Texas, you just need 21 days public notice prior to the auction. That's it. Wow. So it's a short fuse to potentially you're at 21 days to find the lead, skip trace it, call, text, everything, get under contract, sell it, everything in less than 3 weeks. Sometimes you'll get 30 days. But I just established a process. I said, here's my I'm not even going to do an equity filter. Every night, I was getting the freshest leads possible for pre-foreclosures. Basically, they were like hours old when we'd do it. It was just every day. Take that list, skip trace it. And I was just strictly texting them. That was the level of effort I was I'm not going to go crazy. But I was looking for deceased owners. That I did pay attention to. And the very first time I tested that, $25,000 deal. Because I went straight to the children. I knew the owner was dead, and it worked out great. So that was just a standardized process. Just bam, bam, bam. It wasn't earth shattering, but averaging, probably about 2 deals a month from that. I didn't touch it. Once I established that process, everything was done without me unless something became a lead and the acquisition agent needed help, then I would come into the loop. But it was an easy process just to get it up and running and just do it every day. Bam.
Is that data right from the courthouse?
Yeah, so I was using Propelio, and I was training a VA to do it from the courthouse. So I realized Propelio was doing it because a lot of people that's another thing. It's not skip tracing, but pay attention to the freshness of your data. A lot of people say it's real fresh. I don't buy it. I go look for myself because it's all public information for the most part. So, but Propelio was legit. They had a team of VAs every night going into certain counties. Whatever was posted that day, they would do all the data entry, and then the next day you could download everything. It was from that night, and you had a fresh list. And nobody else I found was doing pre-foreclosures that way. Because of what I know about pre-foreclosures, heavily targeted, and I want to be the first one, period. So it's like, grab that list as quick as possible, get it skip traced, throw it into the texting platform, just just like clockwork every single day.
Guys, that's a golden nugget right there. I personally don't know anyone doing that, going in to pull fresh pre-foreclosure or foreclosure data and texting the newest ones, specifically of dead people and then to their relatives. So if you want to get really granular with things, check that out.
I can tell you, it can get complicated, especially if there's no probate. Trying to get a payoff statement for a deceased person from a bank, it can get a little nerve-wracking, but it's very doable. And if any of y'all ever encounter that, let me know. Like, I'll gladly give some pointers on how to walk through that one, especially if there's no will, because banks or big institutions have their standard processes. Once they deviate outside of that, they really don't know what to do. So I'll gladly, give y'all some tips on that because we've done some great deals that way. So
I have a question on that real quick though. If the person's dead and there's no probate, who's signing over the house?
the heir. So in Texas, we can do an affidavit of heirship. It's a real simple. I can literally do one today. If I found a lead today and they provide the information, I just need a death certificate and fill out a basic questionnaire about the facts of that person's life. I know that's not feasible in every state necessarily.
Yeah.
And that's why I tell our people, like, we have customers all over the country. Florida, I don't remember exactly how they were doing it, but we have some guys in Florida that had a unique way they were handling the probate, because they are required to do a probate. A lot of times there's an expedited process for lower value estates, which a lot of these houses are, because if it's fallen into that type of distress, it's probably lower value because the family didn't have the means to do what they need to do to dispose of it. So.
Okay, we just had this issue a lot, so I appreciate you taking a second on that.
No problem.
Larry, step back right before skip tracing is, you're pulling down your data and your lists. A lot of people are pulling lists from the same places. We're pulling it from PropStream, Propelio out on the East Coast. I don't know that it works that well out here, but PropStream, county level, list source. You had mentioned before successor data. I use Foreclosures Daily. Are there any other vendors that we should have our eye on, or any other unique sources perhaps that we should try out?
Well, I referenced code violations. I don't know that there's a national provider of those. I was getting them at first. I was training a VA to go into my county, the counties I was interested in, to go in, because I could do a quick little video on how to search for them. Either learn how to get those yourself, because it is a good list all by itself, or Investors Toolbox, Benutech, I forget their name. They used to be called something else, but then it's Benutech is the name of the company, or the
Rebo Gateway.
Rebo Gateway, yes. So they have these different offerings. Well, I paid for, I think it was because they have I think it was called Investors Toolbox, or Investors Title Toolbox, or something like that. You have to prepay. It was like $1,000 for 60,000 leads in a year or something. I went ahead and did that because they were the only source I could find. They were doing code violations. You just specify property type, zip code, whatever. You give them the parameters and they would send you the list. It was kind of a manual thing. You'd have to email this form over and then they would send the spreadsheet to you. But I got deals from it. PropStream may offer code violations. I haven't seen it, but I haven't looked lately. A guy called, he has a website called myleaddog.com. I can't remember his name. I've spoken with him a couple times. Nice guy, pretty knowledgeable. He was, now Adam Data may provide this, I'm not sure, but he actually provided delinquent mortgages 90 to 120 days late. That's a good list to have. I know I can't tell you how many deals I got off of it, but I did some small samples with it, not super small, but I tested a couple of times. I got at least 2, maybe 3 deals from that. So it's just another form of distress, especially if you can stack that with anything else. So you covered a pretty good list right there as far as lead providers. I just, and I use multiple lead providers because somebody might have a better data set for this lead type, and then this other service may have a better data set for this lead type. I really get into the weeds, like who's got the cleanest format for me, because that's labor. And, all things being equal, if company A's format sucks for me, but company B's is usable right out the gate, I'm going with company B.
Sure. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. All right, one of the last questions, and we're almost here at the end, guys. one of my best lists personally this year has been golden address. Are you guys able to provide that, or is there something similar for that within Skip Genie?
Golden address. I've heard that reference. Can you refresh my memory on that?
Yeah. So golden address is just what I know some people were calling it specifically, but that's like a credit level data where they have not had the official, what's the relocation thing with the post office called?
Yeah.
They
Okay.
haven't filled that out yet, but credit card companies are usually the first to get that, and they're sending like credit card bills to like this new address.
Okay. Unless I don't know about it and we have it, I can't say that we have that. There's a chance one of our providers is doing that and they just haven't told us, but they're pretty good provider. I can't say that we're doing it.
Sure. Okay. I wasn't sure. So I from one of my providers, I got that, and they kind of changed formats, and long story short, I'm not sure if we still have it either, but it was a good one for a while. When we send in the manual skip trace, we would get it back and it would be like a third column on the right-hand side where some would have it, but most would not.
That's something. I'm glad you mentioned it's something for me to ask that question. And I've never had a strong focus on the addresses we provide because most 90-something% of our customers, probably 98, are just, it's good for a reference, but as far as actually doing anything with the address history we provide, it's just, nobody's really doing anything with it. Back when I was doing a ton of it manually, which I still do at times when I'm going to skip trace, the addresses, I was trying to tie people, like look for a relationship between people and an address. It wasn't functional, it was more informational for me. So,
sure. All right, last question here. In the next year, a lot of people are talking about like kind of a downturn coming. And certainly with technology, the way it's changing in our industry, certainly with the way skip tracing has become available, everyone's got these texting platforms and stuff now. What do you think is the one or maybe couple things that investors can do to really stand out in a world where people are getting 10 text messages a day for politics and now their house and everything? How do you think as an investor we can stand out in this coming market where we're just getting more and more crowded with more investors?
once I figure that out, I'm going to sell like $40,000 courses. That's something I've been kind of thinking about because there hasn't been any major shifts. It seems like everything's just getting saturated across the board. There hasn't been any major shifts. It's maybe a new marketing channel pops up. Everybody kind of starts crowding into it and they keep doing everything else. I'm really looking to see I think mail probably got a little bit better for a little while because everybody was going after RVMs and the real quick, easy, it's like, hey, this is new, trying to be on the forefront of that. But, it's all cyclical. That's hard to do. How do you, especially with the phone calls and the text messages, because people are starting to get annoyed because they're getting so many of them. It's campaign season. I'm getting tired of getting text messages from these different candidates and all this stuff. I really don't know the answer to that. One thing that's on my brain right now is it should have already happened. It's not necessarily how do you differentiate, but how are you going to adjust if this happens? If you do a lot of cold calling or ringless voicemails, the FCC is pushing the telecom companies to shut down the robocalls and the RVMs. So if your major or your only strategy is cold calling, RVMs, or texting, at some point, to me, it's not a matter of if, but when. It might be 10 years from now because there doesn't appear to be any urgency. But they've issued a ruling and they've directed these telecom companies because it's become so problematic to stop these calls. The technology is available. They can identify like the spoofing and all that, and just stop them cold in their tracks. There's going to be a lot of investors hurting because it could happen tomorrow. It's like, what are you going to do? I mean, I have my thoughts on it, but maybe it's manual. Go back to just old school. It's more expensive, but there's going to be way less people doing it at that point because now it got a little bit harder. It's not so easy just to throw it to an auto dialer or hand it off to some VAs anymore. Now, but again, there's opportunity with everything. So
yeah, absolutely. I think when things start to shift, there are opportunities where people, like you said, if people stop doing something, if you're the one still doing it or you're the first one into a new technology, there's always going to be a pretty big margin, I think, for people to find there.
the old trust me, I've done a ton of this. Back when I got started, it was this speakerphone, but it was effective. It still worked. Obviously, you can't do as many, but there's a lot of opportunity. If that happened, and at some point, I'm convinced it will. Like they've been told to stop it. At some point, it will. I just don't know when. And
Yeah, a lot of people are reliant just on text messaging right now. And I've tried to tell a lot of people just, it's a great channel. Great, great, great. Cheap, easy, fast, but just don't be 100% reliant on text because it's changing real quick, and it's probably going to be cut out at some time.
yeah, to me, that's one I would never rely on that completely at all. It's great. Like I said, cold calling never stopped for me. Even when I started doing the text blast, I didn't call the foreclosures, that one particular list. That was just the first step in my process because I could reach everybody really fast and try and get the low hanging fruit while I'm taking the time to do the calls. It was a multi-layered process there. So definitely don't be a one-trick pony because at some point the rug's gonna get pulled out from underneath you.
Yeah, absolutely. The game really changed for us when we had 3 steady channels going at once. That was just us, though.
I would really, Facebook's always changing. Y'all probably know Chris Chico. I played around with his stuff. I own 2 rentals now because of it. I didn't spend a ton of money. So anything, Instagram or Facebook, anything like that, I would really, if you're not doing that, again, it's not as new. There are more people kind of get in those waters. But I know I personally am not seeing it seemed like a bunch of people, it caught a little, became a little bit of a fad, maybe 6, 8, a year ago, something like that. Because I was seeing a bunch of We Buy Houses ads, but now I haven't seen one in a while. So I would try and get smart on that. Is there any way to differentiate yourself through that channel?
Sure.
Rather than just doing a static ad, like, Chris did the zip code signs or whatever I bought. Maybe it's a video where you blast a video yourself showing a house that you rehabbed. So I bought this house and did this to it. I can do this with your house. That's a differentiator. And they get to see you. It's not just an ad. Because anyway, you got me just kind of spitballing here. But I built Skip Genie basically off of podcast and Facebook. I'm a big believer in social media.
Sure. No, that's amazing. I love those one-off ideas like that. That's really good. Well, Larry, thank you so much for all your time today, my man. Tell everyone where to go to check out your services so everyone can start skip tracing with you guys.
Yeah, if you want to check us out, our website, just skipgenie.com. If you have any questions or any issues or anything at all, like I said, that was a genuine offer to help. If you encounter a situation on a great deal, it's kind of hairy with title issues in the bank, whatever. My email is larry@skipgenie.com. And I still get people contacting me from podcasts 2-3 years ago. So I'm used to getting random emails, even if we haven't met or I don't know you. I'll do what I can to either hop on a call, or if it's something simple, just shoot you a note back and kind of tell you how you might be able to handle it.
Yeah, that's amazing right there. That's an amazing offer. I think it's really cool that you do the weekly coaching call with everyone and like kind of help people out. I think that's the reason why I like touching base with people on a weekly basis here too. Just to try to help, but to be, they can hear my voice and see my face. I like that. And I like that you do it a lot. So keep up.
And I'll let everybody know it's not a structured call at all. I don't go in there with a plan. I might have something topical that I want to talk about, but it's a Q&A call. I'm like, okay, once we get things going, all right, give me your question. I like back and forth and answering questions, like real, hands-on stuff kind of deal.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, guys, I hope you pulled some tactical stuff out of here. You pulled some gold nuggets out of this call. I think that was really good. Thanks for all that information, Larry. Thanks for your time, man. Really appreciate it. And look forward to talking to you again, brother.
All right. So thanks, Josh. And sorry about being 2 minutes tardy.
No, brother, you're all good. Hey, guys, have a great day. Talk to you again. See you, Larry. Thank you, sir.
See you.
Bye-bye.